to call this meeting to order. Thank you so much for attending our special joint meeting between the County Board of Supervisors, San Benito County, the Council of San Benito County Governments is here, City Council of the City of Hollister, and the City Council of the City of San Juan Bautista. And I have asked the respective mayors if I may call the meeting to order on their behalf, and they have agreed that my calling it to order qualifies for their agency as well. At this time, I would like to ask Supervisor Munzer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? Salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk of the Board, if you could, we could have roll call, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Council, Board Member, I'm sorry, Supervisor Munzer.
Here.
Supervisor Botello.
Here.
Supervisor Rivas.
Here.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Here.
Chairperson Barrios.
Here.
For the City of Hollister, Councilmember Solorio Luna.
Present.
Councilmember Carson Clower.
Here.
Councilmember Gomez.
He'll be running about 30 minutes late.
Okay, and Vice Mayor Lund.
That would be for, this is Mayor Lund for San Juan Bautista.
I'm sorry. I apologize. And Mayor, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Mayor Ignacio Velasquez.
Here, and Councilmember Friend is absent tonight.
Duly noted. And Mayor, let's see here.
San Juan Bautista, Robert Lund.
Mayor Lund, Councilmember West, Councilmember Bosch, and Councilmember Martorena. The roll has been called.
We were short one.
Sorry.
Rick Edge. Yeah,
Councilmember Rick Edge.
they voted you off the
Duly
island.
noted. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we want to, do we want roll call for the COG directors? Is that an appropriate thing to do at this time? It may not be necessary because you've already called most of them, but it'd be important to know for the COG record. Yes.
Certainly. The COG directors are
Mary.
Chairman Munzer, who is also a member of the Board of Supervisors. Board of Supervisor Anthony Botello.
Here.
Councilmember Bosch. Mr. Victor Gomez. Mr. Gomez is not here, and Mayor Ignacio Velasquez.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion at this time to acknowledge certificate of posting.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, motion, I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our regular agenda, we're here today to discuss and possibly approve a joint sales tax initiative. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our CAO, Ray Espinosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Approximately 5 to 6 months ago, your board has requested staff to discuss avenues on addressing our infrastructure, our failing infrastructure within our county. This includes roads, buildings, and many other factors that we're confronted with. Your board has missioned our ad hoc through the intergovernmental to work with our local agencies, the City of Hollister and San Juan Bautista, on finding a best option to move forward to tackle some of these problems. With that, an initiative has been discussed and has been looked at, and county staff has actually put together different initiative strategies over the last 5 months. Unfortunately, with every meeting, there's been more questions asked and more different considerations or thoughts with regards to the meetings. So what your board asked of myself and staff at one of our prior board meetings was to put this meeting together to talk to both the council, City of San Juan Bautista, as well as the City of Hollister, as well with our county Board of Supervisors, to discuss what we can do with regards to a sales tax initiative, as well as to deal with our infrastructure, our failing infrastructure within our county and city limits. So what I'd like to do is first kind of just give you a highlight of the agenda, kind of what's been planned. The first item that we'll be presenting from the county will be a conversation or a discussion with David Leifer. He's our financial analyst. He'll be able to help us with regards to the initiative and the different avenues that we possibly can take. So he'll be presenting to the board, councils, and the public, looking at the pros and cons to the different scenarios and different strategies. After that, we'll invite COG, our interim COG director, Mary Gilbert, to discuss the roads and kind of what they've done with regards to their initiative. And then at that point, I'd like to turn it back to our Chairwoman Barrios, to get city input, either through the mayors or the city managers.
And what I would like to add with the consensus of the councils and the board is that we didn't include public comment, but I know that we should give an opportunity to the public today to be able to ask questions or to address us in any way that they'd like. So if we have a consensus to include that, I would like to do that after there's discussion perhaps from this board before any decision is made, that they may come up and give their 3 minutes, and give them 3 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. So I'd like to go ahead and invite David at this point.
Thanks, Ray. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, the city councils, and the COG. My name is David Leifer. I work with a firm, K&N Public Finance. We're financial advisors or municipal finance consultants. We work with a number of counties, cities, transportation agencies on bond-related matters typically, but they often involve sales taxes and sales tax financings. So what I'd like to do today is very briefly provide a bit of a framework, something I hope will be a framework for your discussion as you consider a joint sales tax and all the different strategies and options that are available to you, and try to narrow down the conversation, isolate the sort of key factors that I think you need to grapple with and the key trade-offs between the different strategies as you proceed. And I applaud you for this kind of conversation and getting together and trying to move ahead jointly. And I'm going to lay out a few specific options that for you to consider, and that'll help us identify what these trade-offs are that I'm talking about. Sarah, what should I do with this? Jump right in. Thanks. Let's go to page 1. Okay, great. So I think there's some hard copies as well for those that are not able to see. So on the first page, I just want to touch base about some terms, make sure we're all talking about the same thing when we talk about sales tax, because there often are sort of 3 related taxes that are commonly referred to as sales tax. The first being a sales tax on in-state retail sales, then there's a use tax, and then there's something, and this is the most important one for us, this transactions and use tax. This is the tax we're talking about today. This is where the cities and the county and the COG have flexibility to add on to the statewide sales and use tax. If we go to the next page, you'll see here, these are the different taxes that we have currently in San Benito County. There's the basic 7.5%. That's the statewide rate, plus a local sales and use tax that is split between county transportation and the city-county piece. So 3/4 of that, there's a 6.5% state tax, and then there's an extra percent that is shared, 25 cents for transportation, and then 75 cents between the city and the county. We're not touching that today. So we need to know about it, but we're not touching that. So then there's this concept of add-on taxes, right? And there are a couple of them that already exist within the county. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. The city of Hollister, of course, has a transactions and use tax, 1%, went into effect in 2008, and my understanding is that it ends in 2018. So that's a critical fact for us all to keep in mind. And then the city of San Juan Bautista also has a tax, 0.75%, that went into effect in 2005. And so down at the bottom, I've just totaled up, this is what the taxpayers see when you add on the statewide tax. So you got a total tax right now of 8.5% in the city of Hollister until at least March of 2018, a tax of 8.25% in San Juan Bautista, and then 7.5% in the unincorporated area of the county. So who can impose taxes? Because that's relevant for today. Well, first, the cities and county can. Pursuant to the Revenue and Taxation Code. And there are a couple different kinds of taxes, and I know the board members have probably heard from me before, so I hope I'm not rehashing, but we'll get past this part soon. There is this concept of a general tax versus a special tax. So a general tax requires only a majority vote, so that's a big benefit for a general tax. But a general tax also can be spent by the government on any sort of operational purpose. It's not designated just for a specific purpose, whether it's public safety or libraries or roads. That would be a special tax requiring a 2/3 vote. And so you can imagine in your mind the trade-offs here, at least from a political point of view with the voters. A general tax is a lower threshold to pass, but voters might be more comfortable with a special tax if they have a special purpose in mind for that tax. So that's one of the obvious trade-offs. Some jurisdictions have used a general tax, and at the same time as they've gone out for their vote, they've accompanied it by an advisory question. Some places that have in mind a particular use for their general tax have said to the voters, hey, do you want us to use this general tax for X, whatever that purpose is? And then the voters can advise. But even if the voters advise, the board or the city council, if the tax passes, is not limited or restricted in that way because it's a general tax, and by definition, you need to be free to be able to spend that money as you see fit. Presumably, if you went out with an advisory question and they gave you that advice and the tax passed, one would think you would follow the advice, but by law, that's not required. Okay, so that's the general tax. And you could also go out for a special tax. That's where you would designate it for a particular purpose, and that requires a 2/3 vote. So that's the kind of tax that a city and county, the add-on tax, you could propose. At the same time, and we're going to hear from the COG, countywide transportation authorities or councils of government can pursue under a different law, under the Local Transportation Authority and Improvement Act, a special tax for transportation-related purposes, and that requires 2/3 vote. And when you adopt that tax, you become what's in the vernacular called a self-help county. And there's other benefits to that in terms of securing state and often federal monies. And there are a number of self-help counties around. Santa Clara County is a client of ours, Sonoma County, LAMTA, these are all self-help counties. And there's some restrictions on how you use the money, but it's got to be for highways, local roads, public transit. Often, when a COG passes a sales tax for transportation, there is often a regional project in mind. Perhaps in your case, it would be Highway 25. I'm sure we'll hear about that. And then often there could be a tax sharing with the cities and the county for local roads. It depends how you write the expenditure plan and what you put out to the voters. But ultimately, the voters vote on an expenditure plan, and you'll be limited to the projects set forth in that expenditure plan. So we've got these different taxes that I know are you're all familiar with and are what's on the table today. On the next page, page 4, this is a really important point about transaction and use taxes, or what I'll call add-on taxes. Basically, what the law says is that the combination of these add-on taxes, whether they're passed by a city, by the county unincorporated, by the COG, it can't exceed 2%. Okay, that's critical. Because we know that the city of Hollister already has a 1% tax. So basically, the city of Hollister is limited to any additional add-on tax or an add-on tax by the COG that has effect in the city of Hollister to another percent. Okay, and that's sort of what I'm showing here in this table. The city of Hollister would be limited right now, at least, until 18, to an additional 1% tax. The county is also limited, in a sense, to 1% if you go for a countywide tax that includes the cities because of the city Hollister restriction. But if the county were to go just for a tax in the unincorporated area, because you're only at 7.5% right now, you could conceivably go for a full 2% tax within just the unincorporated area. And then the city of San Juan Bautista, which currently has a tax rate of 8.25%, could conceivably go within just the city of San Juan Bautista for another 1.25% to get up to 9.5%. But if it was part of a countywide tax that would be shared, then it also is subject to the 1% limit, because Hollister is sort of the is the bottleneck, if you will, in terms of the tax. And I just point out at the bottom here that this law that was recently adopted does allow counties to adopt a sales tax just within an unincorporated portion of the county. That's new law, and that is in effect, as I understand. Okay. So what are some of the options that you have? And I'm going to put some numbers behind these in a minute, and then I'll wrap it up. So one option here is, first, the concept of a general tax. And you could do a county-wide general tax and have a tax-sharing agreement between the county and the two cities. And we could talk about how you could do tax sharing based on the source of the retail sales tax, population. There's lots of ways to do it. But conceptually, you would be sharing the revenue. So how much could that be? Well, we basically said, because of that 2% limit, and because the city of Hollister already has a 1% tax, you're limited to 1%. So there could be an additional 1%. And then I say, unless the city of Hollister decides to remove or reduce its current tax and sort of replace that tax with a new tax, in which case there'd be more flexibility under the 2% cap. And if the county, if you went...
Have a question, Dave?
I'm sorry, thank you.
Hi, Dave, thanks.
Hi.
Can you clarify
Yeah.
that statement you just mentioned, that if the city reduces or eliminates it, how does elimination occur?
That's a really good question. You know, Sarah's done a little more research on that. She talked to the SBOE, but my understanding is that by ordinance, the tax can be either reduced or removed. What I don't know yet is whether that ordinance is just adopted by the city council or requires some other threshold, like did it require voter approval to undo the tax that the voters approved to begin with. I don't know if Sarah's here, but maybe we could get back to that.
We'll call her
Thank you.
when
Yeah,
she
yeah.
comes back.
But that's a relevant question. Agreed. So if you guys decided to do I'll call it a county-wide tax shared between the county and the city, whether it's 1% or more with an elimination of the city tax, the COG can also separately pursue a transportation sales tax, a special tax. So they have that ability, and that's what we're all trying to do here. So that's one option, right? And the COG really can only pursue a separate tax up to a combined, the same 1%. So you're going to see some of my options here, but because of the City of Hollister, if you don't reduce or eliminate that current tax, you can only have a total of 1% add-on, whether it's a county-city tax or it's a COG tax. It's all got to add up to just 1%. So if COG's going to go for a 0.5% or a 0.25%, city-county could be free to go for the remainder, or however you decide to do that. Option 2 within the general tax is the county, and I'm speaking now to the county folks, going on their own for just an unincorporated portion. So a sales tax goes out to the voters just in the unincorporated part. At the same time, the COG and the cities could pursue their own taxes. And again, you're limited within each jurisdiction to the 2%. The county, of course, would have a little more flexibility than the city has, because it doesn't have an add-on tax already in terms of the amount that it could go for. But it, you know, that's a separate strategy that the county could consider, certainly. And in fact, it could pursue either a general tax or a special tax in the unincorporated part of the county. So that's a separate strategy. And again, we're subject to the same 2% limit. And then finally, on the special tax, I was really thinking of a COG special tax. And there, again, right now, unless the City of Hollister reduces or eliminates its tax, at least until 18, they would be limited to this 1%. But again, that's got to be in combination with any other taxes that you elect to pursue as a joint basis. And so my final bullet there is, we have to keep in mind, it's all got to add up to no more than 2% in each jurisdiction. That's the limiter. So, okay, I'm going to move on now to this next page. These are just a couple of options I've thrown out for you to at least start to chew on. These first 3 options are really intended to be feasible today without the city reducing or eliminating its tax. because that's kind of another step that we'll need to hear from the city. But these first three options don't require that. Option 4 and other variants of it obviously, could be pursued that would require it. So I'm just going to throw these out, and I'm not endorsing any particular option, just things for you to think about. So as an example, option 1 is basically a joint tax at 75 cents, or 0.75%, and a special tax by the COG at 25 cents. And I throw that out as an illustration just to show that it works. It's 1% add-on. City of Hollister has a 1% tax, keeps everybody under the 2% limit. And so if you look down the left-hand column, I have this little row called resulting rates. So you see, what would that do? Well, that would take the county to 8.5%. It would take the City of Hollister up to 9.5%, assuming they don't reduce their tax. And it would take San Juan Bautista to 9.25%. So it works within the 2% limitation. I've got some estimated revenue numbers that Sarah and we have developed based on some 2013 State Board of Equalization sales tax numbers. They're not precise. They would change for sure, but it gives us sort of a reference point. And we've applied some allocations here also between the county and the city. And in this case, I have a slide later that shows you what the allocations are, but it was just really based on retail sales within the county. I think it's 44% come from the county and 54% from the City of Hollister and 2% from the City of San Juan Bautista. So for purposes of today, I'm using those allocations. Obviously, that's a discussion point in the future. But we need to start with something. So how many measures are we talking about? We're talking about 2 separate measures. So the voters would see 2 measures because the COG special tax has to be separate from the general tax. And then a couple of pros and cons here. Obviously, the COG becoming self-help would be positive for the road program within the county and be a lever to get additional funding, I think, from state and federal sources and identify priority transportation projects. And as a con, as a pro, I suggest that this works right now without any reduction of the city tax. Now, the city could still decide to reduce the tax to entice the voters to support this plan, but it's not obligated to do so. On the con side, you're looking at 2 measures, if you consider that a con, voters would be presented with 2 different measures if they happen at the same time. I guess if they don't happen at the same time, then they wouldn't be. And there requires some agreement on the tax sharing. Okay, so that's option 1. Another variant, and again, no endorsement here one way or the other, just to show here's another way to get at just 1%. It's for the county and cities to get together for a 1% tax, and the COG were to do nothing, and that works the same way, and it gets you to the same result because it's only 1%. But you don't become a self-help county, and we're not able to get those benefits for the road program that way, unless you elect to use your general tax for roads. Option 3, moving on quickly here, is the county going out just in the unincorporated area, and the COG going. And then I don't know what the cities would do, of course. So here, county unincorporated only. I'm suggesting anywhere between a half cent to a full cent, and maybe the COG going out anywhere from a quarter to a full percent, because it could, depending on whether the City of Hollister were to do anything else. And you can see what that would do revenue-wise. These are annual revenues, and the county would go up to 8.5%, depending on whether it went for a half or a full cent. City of Hollister could go all the way up to 9.5%. Let's see, why would the City of Hollister go up there? I need to think about that. Oh, because of the COG. Because of the COG passing a tax. That would bump up the city's tax. And then San Juan Bautista the same. So what would be the benefit of this, at least for the county's point of view, I guess? It gets tax revenue to the county. It still leaves the cities and the COG with flexibility to pursue their own strategies, and it doesn't require any tax sharing, basically. And so ultimately, there's a political calculus. What are the voters most likely to support? Through all of these, we need to be thinking about that. On the negative side, still there's 2 measures, and keep in mind, if there's 2 measures, if the COG goes and there's an unincorporated tax, or if the COG goes and there's a joint tax, the voters in each jurisdiction will see 2 measures. That's just going to be the way it works. Unclear politically whether voters would be more likely to support a tax just in the unincorporated area versus a countywide tax, and that's something that we're going to talk about, maybe how to get at that. Finally, the last option here is something higher than 1% combined. And that's going to require the City of Hollister to commit to reduce or eliminate its tax, presuming we have the legal authority to do so. And I just use an example here. Instead of going for 1% of total tax, now we can go for 1 1/4. And you could do that, 75 cents regionally between you and the county, the cities, and 50 cents for the COG, or a full 1% for city county, and 25 cents for the COG. I mean, there's lots of variance here, and I provided sort of the results of that. And, of course, this would be in conjunction with the removal or reduction of the city tax. And so you can see my resulting tax rates gets the county another, from 750 to 875, gets the City of Hollister at 875 also, so you're consistent with the county at that point if you get rid of your current 1% tax. But that might bring the City of San Juan Bautista up pretty high to the 9.5% limit. So, it gets you the COG, self-help tax, gets more revenue generated in total, because we're talking about 1 1/4 now instead of just 1%, and it gets the city and the county aligned in their tax rates. You're back to the 2 measures. You're back to getting some tax sharing, and the city's got to do its thing. So let me close now with just a couple of takeaways here, and I'll be done. There we go. So what are the takeaways? Well, one, we got to work with this 2% limit. Okay, I mean, I think that's obvious. And the current capacity for countywide taxes is 1% unless the city elects to reduce. And within that 1% would be the COG tax as well. With the COG tax, voters are going to face 2 measures. That's even if the city and the county were to go their separate ways or to go together regionally. If you go your separate ways, the voters in, let's say the City of Hollister proposes a new tax. The voters in the City of Hollister get that new tax plus the COG tax, and the voters in the unincorporated area get the unincorporated county tax plus the COG tax to vote on. So that's why they're each seeing 2 taxes, even though there's actually 3 taxes floating around under that scenario. So what are the key issues? We didn't talk about how long is the tax going to be. Is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Ultimately, how much is it going to be? Is it a 1/4 cent, 1/2 cent, or more? And which of these approaches are you going to pursue? And I think the key is going to be which is going to garner voter support, which is most likely to succeed, and still meet the revenue needs of each of the stakeholders here. And I know there are projects that each of you must have in mind, including the COG, certainly. And so it's going to be important to look at how much money is being generated by this to make sure that whatever strategy you work towards is going to be satisfactory. Of course, some amount of money presumably is better than none, so the political piece is important. One possibility is certainly to pursue a voter survey. I think the COG has done that. We'll probably hear from them. They've probably done it just for the COG. I don't think anybody has asked, would you support a tax by the COG of X and a countywide tax of Y, or a county unincorporated tax of Z? That question might help you to understand what's going to be feasible in terms of a sharing agreement, and that might be a next step. And then one last point, and this is more in my bailiwick, but when we consider those dollar numbers, those are annual numbers. So we multiply those out with time. If it's a 10-year tax, there might be growth, of course, so you'll be generating more. When you have a long-term tax, you're able to accelerate dollars for big capital projects through the use of bonds if you choose to. So obviously, if you're just doing hiring of deputy sheriffs or maintenance on roads, you're probably not going to bond for that. But if you're building a big new highway system or a jail, then you're going to need to accelerate those dollars, and bonds can be used that way. And then in my appendix, these are where some of those numbers came from, basically showing you what each level of tax might generate, both countywide and unincorporated. And then I show these allocations that were taken from the 13 SBOE numbers. And again, these are just a starting point for conversation. There's lots of ways one could approach tax sharing. So, Ray, I'm done. I'm happy to answer questions now or later.
What I'd like to do is ask Sarah if she's still here. There was a question from Supervisor Rivas in regards to removing how the city could remove their tax in the event that they.
Yeah, how does that?
So both Matt and I will probably be chatting about this. I've just gotten the answer back from Donna, I believe her last name's pronounced Palushki, from BOE, and she has said that lowering and removing taxes can be done through a recension ordinance, and she did provide a template of that. Myself, I just actually let county council know about this very recently, so they have not been able to dive in and research.
Yeah. Good evening, board members and members of council. Matt Granger, County Council. So as Sarah just indicated, a question was posed to the Board of Equalization about the rescission of the Hollister Cities tax. I have read what the board sent back to Sarah. I'm not sure that the Board of Equalization understood the question correctly. It seemed to me that what they were replying to is where the city adopted a tax via ordinance, how would that tax be repealed? Obviously, it could be repealed by ordinance. I'm not sure that the Board of Equalization understood that the tax had originally been adopted by an initiative. Ultimately, I'll say two things. One is that if there was an initiative for a use and transaction tax put on the ballot, within that language, there could be the repeal of the original City of Hollister tax. Who would vote on that? I think the people of the City of Hollister, so there might be some differences on the ballot between what went to the county voters and what went to the city voters. But ultimately, how that tax is handled and how that tax is repealed is a City of Hollister issue. It's not really a County of San Benito issue. It's a legal question for the City of Hollister. So we have your city attorney here, Brad. I don't know if you want to say anything, but it's really an issue for the City of Hollister to figure out.
You may come up to the podium.
How's that for being put on the spot? Yeah, Matt did send me the resolution or the information, and it does refer to a case where this pre-Prop 218, where the matter was adopted by an ordinance, and in that case, it could be rescinded by an ordinance. I had this years ago in Sutter Creek in the very early days of Prop 218, and in that case, it was something that was already on the books, and the increase was done by an ordinance, and then we were able to, or by a vote, and then we were able to do it by ordinance, but it was never tested in court. So this is really new ground. I would suggest that we do, if the inclination is to move forward with this, we do, as Matt mentioned, that we have to delineate the City of Hollister and possibly San Juan Bautista separately from the county-wide, and that they have these ordinances. And it's going to really be a complicated ballot statement and a really complicated issue on what happens if one of the cities votes to rescind, the other does not, and then what would happen. So this is a complex issue that's kind of a hard one to discuss at 4:45 as I'm driving to this meeting from Salinas with the county council. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, any questions of Dave before before our CAO brings up the next presenter? Yeah. No? Okay.
So I'd like to invite Mary Gilbert up.
Good evening, Mary Gilbert, Interim Executive Director for the Council of Governments. So I'll be inviting Eileen Goodwin of Apex Strategies to present to you some information about transportation funding needs and transportation sales taxes, and kind of give you a little recap of what you've already seen, the full presentation of our survey results, but just a reminder of where we stood as far as a sales tax there. Wanted to take this opportunity while you're all here to just kind of go over what the needs are and why we see a transportation tax possibly being a solution for our roadway improvement needs. So I will go ahead and get Eileen started. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Well, I know many of you, but not all of you. So my background is I'm the former executive director of the Santa Clara County Traffic Authority, which was the first self-help county in the state of California. It was a sales tax measure that built Route 85, widened Highway 101, took the stoplights off of 237 in Santa Clara County. And that agency was sort of infamous for wanting to be renewed. And while we passed at a 50% plus one and beyond that, it was litigated by the State Taxpayers Association, and that's where the famous Gardino decision that has been referenced, where the sales tax measures for special districts now have 2/3 requirement, which you've already heard about. So I became a consultant, and actually Santa Clara County was one of those counties that eventually did what Dave was mentioning, which was to go back in 1996 and put on the ballot a 1/2-cent sales tax into the county coffers with an advisory measure. And I was the administrator under contract of that project list. But I'm here today to talk about the COG, and I'm happy to do so. Just to let some of you know who maybe aren't following transportation as closely as some of the rest of you, I know that not all of you have an opportunity to sit on the Council of Governments and get enmeshed in our transportation funding issues, but I'm sure you see this at the local level. And for those of you in the audience, just wanted to let you know that statewide, in 2011, there was a statewide needs assessment done, and I don't think it's any surprise to any of you that there was over $538 billion worth of needs just in the state of California, and the estimated revenues for all sources in that time frame is $242 million, which is only 45% of what's needed. One of the things that's happened to transportation is that many of you are aware that one of the big funding sources is our gas tax, and gas tax is not keeping pace, partly because of inflation and partly because of more fuel-efficient vehicles. On the inflation side, in 1993, the value of the tax of what we're collecting right now, 18 and change, is now down to 11.5% value compared to where it was in 1993, which is a 37% decline in buying power. And by the way, we've not increased our gas tax statewide since 1993, which I'm always reminded because I've got kids in that era, so and they're now in college. Fuel economy up, gas tax down. Vehicles are using less fuel per mile. And back in October of 2007, a light-duty vehicle went up to 20.1 miles per gallon. Now that same vehicle is getting 25.5 miles per gallon. And so what's happening, of course, is that these vehicles are not going to fill up at the gas station as often, and therefore they're not paying as much tax. What's also happened, and what this is attempting to show, is, as has already been mentioned, there's a lot of counties in the state with these local taxes. There was some bonding done through the statewide voters putting some bonds into transportation specifically. And that purple big lump at the bottom, the SHOP funds, are used for maintenance. And you can see the line there is 11, 12, and you can see that now down where we are in 14, 15, you can see how it's really fallen off the fiscal cliff. And that's a spending per year. So people always say, well, won't the federal government come in and help? Well, here's our federal government. And as you can see, they are looking very much in the red. And this is the status of the Highway Trust Fund. So that's specifically what this graph is showing you. So you can see that we're going under. And what's happened there is that the State Highway Trust Fund has had to borrow almost $50 billion since 2008 to meet authorized expenditures. And we just had MAP 21. You might have been familiar with the term ICE-T and T21. Now the new one is MAP 21, which is our federal bill, which did not increase the amount of revenues for transportation. It held steady, nor did it address a future funding mechanism to create a reliable funding stream. Again, it's very much relying on the federal gas tax. So one final thing I thought would be helpful for people to understand, and I know you're very familiar with this as you look at your capital improvement budgets and hear from your public works directors, is this is the pavement life cycle. And what you see on the bar on the left is PCI is a measurement that's an actual, it's a number between 0 and 100. And if you have a PCI in your county and it's at 100, you have excellent pavement. If you have something in the middle there, you have fair pavement and poor pavement. And what happens there, as you can see in what's being shown here, is when you have very good pavement, it's just like at home, it's very easy to maintain something that's already in good shape. You can pave it over with a very thin amount of asphalt and keep that road looking good and riding well. But what happens when you drop down to that red line is then if you let your pavement condition get into poor condition, which is about the 40 PCI, what happens is then when you go to do your repairs, you're in one of those larger construction projects where you're actually cutting out the roadway and having to remove the top, and then I'm sure Jim can tell us all about this, and fill it back in. And it's a much more expensive project, and it involves spending between 6 and 10 times the amount of dollars on the same pavement if you let it degrade. Your PCI for this county right now is 48, which is not great. You're not as bad as some places in Sonoma where they're just giving up and letting their roads go back to gravel. So what could you do? You could become of the self-help county movement, which has already been addressed. 20 counties currently are what we call self-help, which is a half cent usually, potentially a whole cent, very rarely anything less than that. And they represent 81% of the California population. So you can see that this has been very popular in the urban areas to be able to get to that metric with only 20 counties, but yet 81% of the population. So the benefits are many. The way our grants are set up statewide, since the legislators are coming from the more populated areas, and I know this is no news to the COG directors, but the grants all require a local match, and if you have local money, you can match that state or federal money. The federal government doesn't want to see their own money matching their money, so they don't allow for that, and so you have to come up with something local to be able to attract these and leverage these other dollars in. I can definitely speak to the second bullet, which is the more control you have by putting your own money in, the more control you have in particular over Caltrans and the scoping of those projects, the delivery of those projects, and quite frankly, the ability to add what the community desires. And definitely, we did that quite a bit up in Santa Clara County. And of course, you know, obviously job creation, which could happen under any of the scenarios you're going to be talking about. So do you have the ability to become a self-help county? Absolutely. You were a self-help county, and perhaps many of you recognize that, but perhaps some of you do not. You actually passed a half-cent sales tax for transportation specifically back in 1988. And at the time, you had the highest passage percentage in the state. You were one of the first self-help counties in the state, and you passed it here at 83% of the voters voting in the affirmative. It was a 10-year tax, and you did 4 or 5 good-sized projects with that. I think you know which ones they are. You managed to collect $80 million as part of that effort, and the annual average cost to your families here was about $43.75. We did do some testing and some polling recently. I am not the pollster, but we do have, and I know all of you have seen this before, but for the public here, really the sexiest project up there was 87%, the top one there, maintaining roads and repairing potholes. I think people definitely understand that. They understand the value of keeping your pavement in good shape. The next one there is improving transportation for youth, seniors, and people with disabilities. Highway 25, widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes between Hollister and 101, came in at 66%. Bikes and peds, bus service, and adding to the commuter train service all came in at over a majority. Right track, wrong track. The reason why I added this slide to the presentation is just in general, in my experience, and I work all over the state, if your citizenry who are voters do not feel that the county's going in the right direction, it is very hard to pass a tax of any sort. And so the good news for you is the bottom line there is June of 13, and then the top one there is March of 15. So you're doing something right. You've gone from 42% feeling that you're going in the right direction in 13 up to 49% in 15. So that's definitely going in the right direction. And you see the drop down there also on the wrong track. This is also very, very hopeful for anything that you choose to move forward with. What this one is there were two, we did a split sample where part of the voter sample was asked first whether they would support a transportation sales tax measure just for 25 and Highway 25 and nothing else. And the other half of the folks were asked first whether they supported a collection of projects, including pothole filling, transit for seniors and the disabled, the train, and of course 25. And then we compared the results. And what we found is the multi actually had 75% of those in the survey saying yes, they would support that, compared to 65% if it's just Route 25. So this doesn't always happen. I'm very interested to see that you actually have a project, as was already mentioned, that is sexy enough that you could get to 65% on just one project, but even more excited to see that you can get to 75%, because of course you only need 2/3, which is 67 and 2/3%. So anything over 70% is very, very good. So again, the ones that are very high priority, this is the high priority test. As you can see, the potholes is up there at 87%, with 55% saying it's a very high priority. And then 25, Highway 25 is 41% saying a very high priority, with 66% saying it's a priority. And again, you've seen these before, but it arrays very similarly to the support. And then what would we do next and why? We'd look to a vote in 2016. Why would you do that? Well, let me give you a couple of data points here. SB 16, which is Senate Bill 16, which is sponsored by Jim Bell from this up in Santa Clara County. He's looking at a 5-year plan that would raise $3 billion a year, and it's a combination, probably you've read about it in the paper, of increasing gas tax, vehicle license fee, vehicle registration fee, adding an actual fee for Teslas and zero-emission cars, because right now they're not paying at the pump. It's a way of starting to have those folks pay into the system. His split would be roughly 50% for Caltrans to do highway maintenance, and 50% would come into your counties and cities by formula to fill potholes. But it's really 50% of 95% of the pot, because what's down here in the bottom is he has currently in the bill, and it has been moving and passing through the various committees, he's got a incentive for self-help. So what's there is that any county that has a transportation sales tax measure that's passed after July 1st, 2015, so that means those 20 agencies that I referenced earlier are not eligible to get into this pot of money, that there would be 5% off the top, which is about $150 million annually. So if you got that, if you were able to go and become a self-help county, you would be able to get a little bit of extra money that you would be able to go after because of your new status, and you would be one of just a few counties that would be able to qualify, provided you make it, and provided a bunch of other people maybe don't go or don't make it. It's a little unclear exactly how that would be divvied up, but it's an interesting concept, and it's obviously inspired a lot of people to be looking at doing something, for no doubt. And then this is my last slide here. You would begin to develop a draft expenditure plan. That's already been referenced. You have the Council of Governments doing a stakeholder group. Some of you have been coming to those meetings. We could expand that. Check in again with voters through a poll. And I should also make clear that the poll that we did, as had already been mentioned, was not contemplating anything simultaneously on the ballot. However, we do these all the time, and, you could split it. One of the taxes could go in June and another one could go in November, and that is done a lot of times in counties. And you would just look at who's more likely to vote and which population is a better one for which subject matter you're talking about. Should you target June ballot? I think we're looking at 2016. It's a presidential. It's a contested presidential. This is an opportunity you don't get all that often. If you delay, you'll miss it because someone will become the president and therefore the incumbent. We don't see the same kind of turnout in a gubernatorial race, even if it is a contested gubernatorial. And should you decide to go in June with one of the taxes, you would really need to know by the first week of March, because that's when the votes need to happen to get onto the June ballot. And as all of us know, more and more people are voting absentee, so really that June ballot is really the end of when the voting happens, and a lot of people are voting during May. Same way with November, you would have to make your decision by the first week of August. So that's our presentation. I'll turn it back to Mary.
Yeah, we have a question. Do you have a question of
I do.
the presenter? Okay.
We step back and talk about the self-help. That's a dollar-to-dollar match right now?
You mean the Jim Bell thing?
No,
Oh, previous.
or whatever it was you were talking about, previous.
So it's varied over the years. There is no formal federal match for self-help counties in California because what the feds do is they put grants together like Tiger grants, and they've gotten away from earmarks, et cetera. So there isn't a program that specifically rewards you at the federal level like what Jim Bell is proposing for the state. And there used to be, and there could be again, pots at the state level where really only self-help counties were allowed to compete for those dollars. And it is, again, with so many of the population in there, it's easy for them to pass things like that, quite frankly, because that's where the legislators are all from. And it does harm the more rural counties, but they have very little they can do about it.
So with that one coming up, what's the match on that, so we're clear?
So right now, he's written it to be that new self-help counties, as defined as post-July 1st of this year, would be eligible for 5% off the top, and his plan is just a 5-year plan in this bill. He's not contemplating this to go on for 30 years or 300 years. It's just a 5-year plan, and it would raise $3 billion a year. So 5% of $3 billion is $150 million. And then what would happen is, and what's a little unclear, when we've talked to his staff, they haven't quite figured out how they would divvy it up, whether they would do a release of these funds each year, so as people maybe came on board, they'd be eligible for year 3 or 4, but maybe not 1 and 2 because they would spend that right away. That part is not in writing yet, but I think the incentive he's trying to give everyone is to get out there and raise these monies locally so that all the counties in the state really are doing their bit. Because what happens, of course, at the state level is that the state ends up picking up the tab for a lot of the bigger projects, as you all know.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Okay. CAO Espinosa?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, I'd like to turn it back to the chair, to Supervisor Barrios, and get city input, and then open it up for discussion.
Okay. Yeah, why don't we start with the County of San Benito and have the supervisors address their concerns and their ideas and how they'd like to move forward. And we'll just go down the line, start with Supervisor Munzer in the end there, and perhaps
Actually,
your thoughts.
I would like to hear from the public first. So
First?
I'll refrain. So, I mean, you can go ahead and discuss it up here, but I want to hear from the public.
Before you make comment?
Yes.
Okay. And Supervisor Patello?
Well, I certainly have had my agenda on this from the start, recognizing the needs for our roads. And, obviously, it would have to be a self-help county. A special tax takes 2/3 to voter approval. I think that would give us a little bit of leverage with the state to get some additional funding, because I'm pretty confident that Senator Bill's bill will pass. And most importantly, anybody who has done any traveling in our cities and in the county could see that the road maintenance has been neglected for some time, not through any of our own faults, because the money has just not come down from the state or the federal government to properly maintain these roads. And if there's been one saving grace of the drought, it has saved our roads. It would be a whole lot worse if we had normal rainfall. And so we're at a juncture that we need to do something. And, you know, I think the public, through our, the COG did a very good preliminary survey. You know, I don't know if I would go as far as hanging my hat on it. But there would be a lot more work to do by all of us and stakeholders in the community to, you know, give the confidence to the public to support a tax for their roads, and that is what we would use it on. And it's a good investment to protect an asset that's already there. If we fail to do this, it's going to cost us a lot more money in the future. And so, you know, I certainly want to work with my colleagues on the Board of Supervisors as well as the council members as far as how do we provide, you know, the most efficient means to manage our, you know, the revenues that is provided by the public. And I know both the cities have their sales taxes and extra sales taxes in place, and they're using them to maintain the services that you know, they need. And the county has been at the bare minimum, and we've been able to get through a very tough recession, and we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Things are improving. Our tax valuations and bases are improving. We're seeing businesses being built. And so, but it's a slow recovery for us. And, you know, one of the questions I'm going to leave is, you know, why would the cities repeal their tax and take a chance? And, but I think if we went and leave tonight agreeing on a transportation tax, that would be a real positive step forward for the futures, you know, of Samuel County and the city of Hollister and San Juan Bautista. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Supervisor Rivas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate everyone that's in attendance. I appreciate the speakers and the presenters. It certainly was helpful to have those presentations a third time, because I think I finally understand what's going on. This is a complex issue, you know, no doubt, and I can only relate it to a headache. You know, when I have a headache, I do anything I can to relieve the pain, right? Take aspirin. I'll lock myself in a dark room and try to take a nap. And so the reason I say that is because this issue has given me a migraine. I mean, this is complex, and this is has been challenging for me. And I tell you, so when I look at these different options and what we have, you know, as a supervisor, the decision we have to make as a board, you know, what I've tried to do is try to take the simplest approach to this problem, and my position hasn't changed, and that is to pursue option 3, which is, in my opinion, for the board and for me as a supervisor, the most appealing, because it's a county unincorporated tax. I mean, the issue, the reason we're here today, or, you know, especially as a board, is our unincorporated area has the lowest tax rate of all of our local governments. So essentially, we're the problem. And I think that, you know, if we pursue any other option, especially with this complicated tax sharing agreement, there's a couple issues I have. First was the question that I had asked earlier about rescinding the tax. In my opinion, it's still questionable, you know. The second is an issue of, I guess you could say, of some fairness, you know, because we can't hide behind the political truth here that unincorporated voters are different than voters that live in the city. Unincorporated voters, historically, when you look at the voting trends, they tend to be more conservative and they tend to oppose taxes. So are we going to really approach this and jeopardize a potential tax opportunity for the city? So that's an issue I have. And I've stated from the very beginning that I would rather approach this from a board perspective or as one supervisor in pursuing an unincorporated tax, because I still think it's iffy if it passes, but I think that at least we present the unincorporated voters the opportunity to increase our tax base at the unincorporated level. And it's up to our board to do the legwork and to make our best case and put our best foot forward to, advance a case that we're going to be responsible with a potential increase and with that funding. But at the same time, it offers our local governments, the City of Hollister, COG, the flexibility to pursue their own taxes. And when I look at the cons, the fact that there's, when you look at the cons, I think that they are political factors that as a supervisor, I could care less about. The fact that there's going to be 2 measures on the ballot. That causes a concern about the ability to get these taxes approved. I think just in general, when you go and seek an approval for a tax increase, it's very challenging. But at the same time, I really believe that if you have a strong campaign, if you have a strong message, and you give voters the opportunity to really go out there and have the opportunity to vote on an increase to improve their community, that's up to us to make sure that that happens. And if voters don't agree with it, then they'll vote it down, obviously. But that's why I, as one supervisor, my position again hasn't changed. I really want to go after option 3, which is a county unincorporated tax only. And then obviously it'd be up to our board what rate we would like to see. I think at our previous board meeting, I had suggested a 1% increase. But that's where I am, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Davis. Supervisor Dela Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've always been a strong supporter of cooperation and working together with both cities, City Hollister and San Juan Bautista with the county. It's an opportunity for us to actually kind of make it an even playing field by having the county and the cities go at 8.5%. And I would support option 1 because it would allow that. However, there is the confusion on when and how the City Hollister takes back that 1% they have right now in place. I would really like to see a lot of these dollars go into improvements of our roads, our sidewalks. We constantly get a lot of calls about the potholes, and that's one of the reasons why I support the option 1. If at the end of the day there's no consensus here, I would strongly support that we go with the COG because it allowed funding for public roads and for Highway 25. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Dela Cruz. My take on this is that initially when we met as the intergovernmental, we came back, Supervisor Dela Cruz and I, and presented option 1. And at first glance, it appeared to be the best way to go. But now that we hear about how difficult it may be to revoke the city tax, and it wouldn't be difficult to do if we really had a method, a clear way of doing it. But if only the City of Hollister is going to be able to vote to revoke it, then it may be a very, very complicated ballot language that is going to be so confusing that people will probably just vote on nothing. So with that being said, I think I am now leaning more towards a quality of life tax increase, which would be countywide, that would be specific. And yes, we would have to have a 2/3 vote, but it would be specific to our roads, perhaps throw in a percentage for libraries, perhaps a percentage for parks, and really be specific. And I believe that the only way that this will pass is if we get all agencies committed to the same goal and that it becomes a citizens' campaign. If it is not a citizens' campaign, this is not going to pass. But you've already done, COG's already done the polling. We know that roads are big on the list. And if I'm not mistaken, Mary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was language with parks or additional, maybe, I don't remember if there was something like that. But I just believe that the quality of life tax is really where we should be directing our efforts. So with that being said, I'll now start with the city of Hollister. Mayor Velasquez.
Thank you. I personally don't believe it's very hard to get the citizens of Hollister to rescind a 1% sales tax. I think that's probably the easiest part of this whole conversation. The difficult part is, where are we trying to go with this? Are we trying to fix our roads? Are we trying just to stay afloat with our budgets? Are we trying to improve the quality of life of our community? I personally don't want to see Hollister going beyond 8.5, but I know how critical it is. It was pointed out with the PSI index. We're at that point where our roads are going to start to double and triple if we don't get them fixed in the next year or two. And that's been my migraine, by the way, for the last several years, is understanding we're up against time. I'm a believer that we really are a small community. We're not 3 different communities. We're a group that needs to learn to work together and help each other so we have one better community. I think it would be fair if we were all looking at an 8.5 across the board and making sure that the citizens understand that we are going to use this money to repair those roads as quickly as possible. We talked about the bonding capability if it was more long-term. And I think it's very important that we understand that, because I think we can all acknowledge that the roads in the city are probably somewhere between $20 to $30 million in repairs, probably the same at the county level. And we're not going to do that by raising $2 million a year. It's going to take a bonding commitment to get those roads done, because they have to be done quickly. I also like what the chair was pointing out about the community projects that I think we all agree that we need. We need that new library. We need facilities, a community center. We need things for our young people to get them off the streets, help them get educated, help them get those high-paying jobs. And it's time we decide what that looks like, so we start putting that plan together and get the community to trust that we're actually going to do that work. If we're going to talk about it and not invest those dollars in what we're saying, we should not have any conversation about taxes any longer, and we should go to the bare minimum and let it be what it is. It's time we step up and put tax dollars to work in the right way. Thank you.
Councilman Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I have not been that involved in COG and in the information that has been given to all of you regarding this tax, I do appreciate the presentations today and knowing more about the recommendations that are being made. I personally have a major concern of any tax being eliminated from the city of Hollister. I believe that we put trust in our citizens, the city, many years ago, and while they voted this in, and actually for the city to just take an ordinance, approve it, to remove this tax, I think we may be very lost in the future in any citizens believing in us or believing in any elected official, because after all, you go out there, you work your community, you get people to believe in you and believe in what you're trying to do for this community and the city and the county, and then you, by the power within you as an elected official, you retract that. And I have a real problem with that. I would like to know more about this, but at the same time, I agree with Supervisor Munzer that we really need to hear more from the public on this. And that's my statement. Thank you.
Councilman Clower.
Yes, thank you. I'm also new to this topic, and I really appreciate the knowledgeable presenters. It seems like everybody really understands what they're talking about, and that's good to have. I think everybody knows that our roads need attention. That's a given. And if the people of the county and the cities want that attention to be paid to those roads, then I'm for it. I'd like to see that go to a vote. Whether it's 1% or 0.5%, I don't know that. So I'd like to see more on that. I'm not really optimistic on a countywide initiative passing for this sales tax initiative. And I might be a little out there compared to the rest of the board and the councils, but I don't want to see Measure E sunset in 3 years. When I came on, I was hoping that we would get a sales tax initiative to extend that for 10 years or make it permanent or whatever it may be, because I think that the tangible improvements that we're seeing are coming from that 1%. Our services are getting better. We're making improvements to the parks. Eventually, I'm hoping that we can kind of work with the county on a better library. And I really think that it's that 1% that's making the difference in our community. I'm personally willing to pay more to get more, and I hope that the city is, and I think that kind of makes this even more complex. I know we haven't really talked about that yet, but I'm with Councilmember Luna that I don't want to see that go away for a day, let alone 2 years, if that's a possibility. Thank you.
Councilman Gomez?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make it quick. I don't support the repealing of the City of Hollister's tax. I support a transportation tax, and I'll allow the county to do whatever they want. Thank you.
Mayor Lund?
By the time it gets down to me, everybody's pretty much said a lot, though. The city of San Juan Bautista would, really like to back the city and the county in their decision of going forward. We're kind of a small fish at that 2%. What do you think, Jim? We'll get a couple driveways fixed out of that if we go for the max. Maybe a curb painted. We're hoping that this special tax will fix. Will this fix it, or is this just, are we going to be able to direct this money in the right way? I think that if we go for this tax and stuff, we're really going to have to advocate and really have to educate the voters. There's been a couple votings, like when we did for the tax for the what was it for the Measure A, and for the TOT tax, that I don't think the county and the city voters were actually informed enough of how much that would help and how much it wouldn't cost them, more of the transportation people. And the county really, I know they need a lot of help, and we'd really like to help in backing them, because those county roads do get us to our cities. And so whatever we can do to help you, we will initiate for that.
Thank you, Mayor Lund.
Thank you.
San Juan Bautista, Councilman Edge?
I don't know if I can get close enough to the mic. This is a very complex issue with a lot of choices that are facing us. I'm very supportive of doing something to fix the problem, but this is the first time I've had a presentation on this subject. I've had nothing to read beyond what I received tonight. So I can't make any decisions tonight about which way we need to go. I have a lot of questions.
Okay. Councilman West?
I feel like an undertaker here. You're going to fix the roads. You're going to fix it next year, or you're going to fix it later. You got to have roads. And Supervisor Botello was correct. If it had rained, those roads would be in a lot worse shape than they are now. And this is not something we can just kick the can down the road. Additionally, I think it is a quality of life. I think that improving our community. I also want to say this is a tough sell. I lived in Aromas for a long time, and now I live in San Juan Bautista. And the emphasis on this is for Highway 25. And I think Highway 25 benefits the county, which benefits Aromas and the city, but that's going to be a tough sell west of 101 and in San Juan Bautista, and even in South County, in Supervisor Munz's area. So I think if we do this, and I think that
Supervisor Barrios was absolutely correct. It's got to be seen as a quality of life. I mean, one of the things people don't realize is you can't have economic development without good roads. People, that's the first thing they come into your town, and if the roads are bad, they'll turn around and go the other way. So I think that it has to be sold as a quality of life. I think we have to make it palatable for people all over the county, and I think that that's what we ought to do. Thank you.
Very well.
Councilman Bach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm kind of torn on this thing. When the presentation was made to COG, we were talking about a 0.5% sales tax strictly for roads. I was all in favor of that. I'm not in favor of a general sales tax increase because I'm going to tell you people something. The citizens don't trust us. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. If we don't give them a specific plan, you're not going to get it. And I just firmly believe in the COG initiative, you might say, to pass a 0.5% sales tax. And I use for examples, and Robert alluded to it, the citizens of Hollister were given the opportunity to increase their TOT tax by 1%. That didn't cost them one dime out of their pocket, and they turned it down. Now, do you really think that they're going to vote and pass a sales tax increase without having a specific, okay, we're going to give these council members and in San Juan, they're going to give us the money, and we can just do with it whatever we please? That's why I feel the 0.5% strictly for the roads, and that I'm pretty sure would pass.
Thank you. Councilman Martorana?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of our challenges is this is a very convoluted issue. There's so many variables and so many people involved in this process, and with, as has been pointed out, different levels of involvement along the way. I can't imagine us coming away from tonight's meeting with any sort of consensus. I think there is a certain measure of concern on the part of our council that Highway 25 will soak up every dollar that comes out of this, and that is not seen necessarily as a benefit for our community. And if you look at the presentation from Cannon Public Finance and at the dollars involved in our, coming into the city of San Juan Bautista, even at a 1% increase, it's $110,000. It's really not that much income. It's difficult for us to get excited about it and to really get behind it without, some measure of commitment. We desperately need a couple of the streets in San Juan to be redone, and they're well beyond our budget means. And without the collaboration with the county, it's hard to imagine how those are ever going to take place. And as I said before, I think the expectation is that all of those dollars are going to go to 25. And if there was some measure of reassurance on that, there'd probably be a higher level of support, a greater level of support in our community.
Or local roads.
Yeah. And the idea of two separate initiatives seems politically very, very difficult. And the discussion about repealing and adding, and boy, it's going to get awfully convoluted, and it's hard to imagine people are going to be educated. We're going to have a real hard time with that. So making it a COG only or a county only is probably the most palatable in my mind.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, at this time, I'd like to give the public an opportunity to come up and address the board. If you have a question, you may go back to your seats, and we'll ask the proper, the person that may have the answer for you to come up. So do we have speaker cards at this time, Clerk?
Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, well, I'll open it up. If you would like to come up, please, you're welcome to. And you will have 3 minutes, so Clerk of the Board, if you could set the clock.
Marty Richmond from Hollister. You challenged me to come tonight. I came. So roll in the PowerPoint. Oh, no, I don't have a PowerPoint. But I'm going to give it to you simple. I said I would back a tax that would bring the unincorporated areas of the county up to 8.5%, like we've got basically in the city, where 67% or whatever it is of the people live. And we have 8.25%, I believe, in San Juan Bautista, if I'm not mistaken. And the richest people in the county, the most wealthy, not everyone, there are poor people out there, but as a group, live in the unincorporated areas. And according to the presentation, I think it was 40% of the sales are in the unincorporated areas. Actually, when I did the math from the, I did it myself from the Board of Equalizations, actually it was 37.4%. So that would give $2 million to the county. They only need 50% to pass it. They can do whatever they want with it. They can spend every single penny on rolls, which is probably more than you'd get from the COG tax with whatever fake stuff is going to come from the state. You know, this, let me dangle 5% out here for you. We'll give you 5% back. I've been down that road. It goes nowhere, okay? We all know the state takes with one hand and gives with the other. How many years have you been waiting for some unfunded mandates? How many years have you been waiting to get paid back? How many times have you had your guy here from the HHS saying, well, we're fronting the state for another 6 months because they're not paying their bills. So you really think they're going to fork that over? The reason, that was a good presentation on transportation costs, but one of the key reasons is left off in the fact that in California it costs more to do a mile of road than anywhere else in the nation, by about 200 times over. And the cost of maintaining roads have gone up 330% compared to the CPI over the last 20 years. That was all left off of there, but let's go by that because that's Caltrans's problem, the fact it has nothing to do, and we have the second highest gasoline taxes in the entire nation. It ain't enough. We all know that. Whatever tax you give the state, it is not enough. The simple answer is just let's get the unincorporated guys, go out and sell it. I would ask the county supervisors to go invest their political clout to go to their constituency, just like the city did when they sold their 1% tax. You go out there and talk to them. Rather than having them tell you, I won't do the taxes, how about going out there and asking them to do it? I mean, are they really so cheap they won't do it? They don't think they're going to get anything out of it? You can promise them anything on an individual basis. It doesn't matter. You're going to get them $2 million. You can spend all of it. As far as the city goes, the city roads, the mayor opposed Measure E. He has not been able to close the gap, and the mayor, not just the mayor, but the whole city council is not, and I will wrap up, they've not been able to close the gap between their spending, but he can take that money and he can put it to roads, all of it. The city council can. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty.
Madam Chair, before the next person comes up, did you say that if the person had a question, that you would have the appropriate staff member come up?
That is correct.
Well, Marty does have a question that I think, and I'm going to put Mary on the spot with it. You know, from the Measure A, and I don't know, maybe you don't know, but maybe this is something we could find out together just for my own knowledge as well. But from Measure A, it raised, I don't know, $40 or $50 million locally over the 10 years. Mm-hmm. How much money was matched, or the federal government and state combined, because we were a self-help county, did that bring back? Because it's a little misleading about the 5%. Nobody knows what that 5% is and how it's to be distributed in the future, or if there's to be additional monies at some point in time if we are a self-help county. But how much did that mean to us with that history?
It was over $80 million of projects that were completed.
I just want that to be known, is the difference of being a self-help county and being a general tax county, and that's absolutely, that's what I thought it would be. It was significant. It's worth doing and taking a chance on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the various boards. It's encouraging to see this gathering this evening. Certainly, I'm enjoying the earnest comments from each of you, and I can tell that each of you do want what's best for our community, and this is a very encouraging thing for me as your sheriff to witness this evening. And I do agree with you that our roads are in disrepair. The roads need a lot of attention. In fact, they need our attention too. If you notice the many potholes, what you might not notice is the lack of deputy sheriffs out patrolling those roads. And I would encourage you, as you muddle through this complex scenario of possibilities, that you closely evaluate any opportunity to bring some much-needed help to your public safety efforts here in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public, you're welcome to come up at this time. When you come up to the podium, please introduce yourselves.
Excuse me, a little nervous. My name is Ray Solano. I represent the Hollister Police Association. This is most about my opinion versus the POA. We, the POA, represented Measure T, Measure E. We were out there walking and talking, trying to get that to pass. With the council members, I agree that I don't think it would be a good idea to repeal Measure E or Measure T because it would show a distrust in our council. I do agree with Rivas stating that it should be county roads and should be to a county tax for the time being until at least Measure E or Measure T sunsets, and then maybe agree upon to work something together. But until then, I think it would be a disjustice to everybody in the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one question. What is the term you plan to propose for this tax? 10 years, 5 years, permanent?
We'll have, because I was going to ask that same question of the consultant who's here, if he's here. What has in the past been more successful? They are more familiar with that. They have numbers that would be more likely to pass as far as the length of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I clarify something for him also?
Yes, you may come up to the podium.
The Measure E tax, just so we're clear on this, it's not about getting rid of that tax. It's that in the 2016 cycle, we have to put it on the ballot. So the question is, do we do this as a group, or are we going to do this on our own? The rescinding the tax is, if we do it as a group, we'd have to rescind part of it, otherwise we'd be at 9.5.
Right.
So we don't want to go below 8.5. It's just that there's a point where we have to bring it back down so we're even. So throughout this whole conversation, the city of Hollister has to face this answer or this question in 2016. If we're not working with the county together, then we have to do our part on our own. So I want to clarify that we're not trying to rescind Measure E and be back at 7.5%, because then we'd be in big trouble.
But wouldn't that reduce the flexibilities of future taxes if this becomes a permanent tax or a 10-year tax?
No, that's the whole point of this conversation today, to keep a 8.5% sales tax across the board. So the city of Hollister would have their monies as they do now, the county would have their monies, San Juan Bautista would have their monies. That's as a general sales tax. The other conversation is a COG special tax. That would change the whole equation. That's why you heard the comments here. It's very complicated, because if we do that, the city of Hollister now would be at 9%. So we have to work out those issues on how we're going to use our monies. And that's really the question here for all of us, is how much do the roads cost to fix? Because without that answer, it's hard for us to know, is this a 10-year, a 20-year, 30-year? because we have to plan for a bond to do it. Then we could have a better idea what that number looks like, the years.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the consultant to come up and just give us a scenario of what has in the past passed, more likely to pass as far as the length of
Sure, thank you. And we can hear from the COG consultants as well. I mean, generally, what we see on transportation taxes, taxes for roads or transportation, especially COG taxes, are on the longer side, 20 years or maybe even longer. That's pretty typical. And I will say that there is a variety of approaches. Another client of ours, Napa County passed a tax and just uses it for local roads, so they're not bonding and accelerating for a big regional project. Whereas, for example, Sonoma County Transportation Authority, they had an expenditure plan that had 40% for a regional road, Highway 101 there, and then other projects returned to the communities for maintenance or pedestrian bike projects, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways it can be done. So, but on the transportation special taxes, I've seen 20 years and even longer, generally. And then on the general tax, and I agree with the statement made, I think, by the mayor about have to identify what the purpose is that you're, trying to tax for. But for general taxes, for general government, for operations, whether it's roads, sheriffs, deputies, et cetera, the successful ones tend to be on the shorter side for the very reason I think that was raised about voter confidence in how the money's going to be spent, and so there's a shorter leash. I've seen them 5 years, 7 years be successful, 10 years. I know Sarah did some research on that, I think, as well, and she could address that. But those tend to be on the shorter side and needing to go back to the community to re-up them based on did you deliver on what you, did the voters get value for their, for the confidence they put in the general government tax. So it depends. General government tax, operational, short, transportation, COG-type tax, longer. Is that helpful?
Thank you for your input. Did the consultant from COG want to come up and address that? Or you don't need to, if that was answered. Okay.
I would completely agree. The other data point that might be interesting is you passed back in the 80s the 10-year tax, and it expired back then. We were very cautious as an industry in the COG-type taxes, and most of the beginning ones were 10, 9, 15. But now for years and years since the 2000s, they've been 20, 30, or permanent. So for transportation with an expenditure plan, and just as a little Columbo here for the San Juan Bautista folks, it's very clear from the polling from COG that the expenditure plan would be more than just Route 25. So, I mean, of course, the policymakers would still have to decide how much more, but definitely you saw the difference between the 75% of the voters being in support with a mixed bag of projects compared to the just 65 for just that one project. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to, as Dave just said, spread it around and make sure all of your voters see that they get something for something.
Madam Chair, if I can expand on that, and I want to make sure we're all clear on this part. If we go with the COG half cent throughout the community, then by agreement, we could work that out as far as how those funds are spent in our local cities. So that money wouldn't be taken and used for Highway 25 unless all of us agreed to that. It would be shared amongst the different governments. So if, for an example, that half cent raised $2 million for the city of Hollister, City of Hollister can say, we're going to use that $2 million for these. We'd like to use this money for this part of what we want to repair. And the county could do the same, and San Juan Bautista could do the same. That's the flexibility with the COG side of it. Am I correct, Mary? So we're...
If we agree to that.
If we agree to that.
Yeah,
That's
so
what I'm
there's
saying.
an agreement.
In the expended.
Well, what I'm saying is we're not going to take the money and spend on Highway 25, all that money. Yeah, I heard that a few times, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Chair, maybe members of the COG can answer this question. If it's a COG sales tax, who approves the spending bills? Is it before it goes to the public for a vote, or after it gets approved and then COG goes through his monthly meetings and then presents the spending approved plan back to respective agencies?
The expenditure plan is voted on, so that's part of the ballot measure. That's what the voters are voting on, is this is what we're going to use the funds for. And that can include, X amount for local streets and roads and different projects. And that's how Measure A was written back in 1988.
So, hold on a minute. So in the language, in the ballot, it'll say a general 40% will go for public roads, San Juan will get this percentage, City Halls will get, San Benito County. It's not Pacific roads like Wright Road or Carpenter Road on Aromas. Would it be that way?
It can be. I mean, it can be as specific as you want it, or more general. It's just, what the voters are going to vote on, and I think what a community outreach effort would help us to determine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Madam Chair?
Continue. Oh, do we have, yes.
Madam Chair, thank you. My understanding was, when we were talking about this at COG, was that each, like City of Hollister, City of San Juan, and San Benito County would do a survey of their roads and determine, okay, we all know that San Juan Bautista needs 3rd Street redone. And I really feel that that's one way to sell the COG, the 0.5%, is because if I can go on and tell people, hey, we're going to repave this part of 5th Street and we're going to, eventually we'll have the money to do it, which we do not have right now, I think it's a selling point. And Hollister can do the same thing with, I think it's Washington Street behind Chronicles. My God, that street, in McRae. So if you went to the voters and said, okay, we're feel that we're going to generate this much money and we'll be able to, maybe over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period, in San Juan, we'll be able to repave the main street. I think it's saleable. But if you just say, oh, we're going to just throw it in a pot, and everybody's going to, in San Juan, is going to say, well, I don't want to put one dime towards Highway 25. Forget it. And you're going to lose. Thank you.
All right. I'll continue to allow the public to come up. So if you have a speaker card or if you want to introduce yourself when you come up, you're welcome to.
Got my notes on it, I'll give it to you afterwards. Hi, I'm Bruce from Ridgemark, actually I'm from Hollister. And all I suggest is however it's worked out, that I would like to see it kept to a specific road repair rather than quality of life. I have a strong passion for the library and for the parks and for the youth programs. But I think the more specific you can be, the more they can see. I mean, the need has been made very clear about what's happening to our roads. I think it's also a great project that they will visually see that money being spent. You can see it in the roads. That could bring a lot of credibility to the doubt that they have as a public, that we have in a doubt of how our different governmental agencies are using, that you've brought up. That I think that road repair is something that's very visible, that you can say, hey, right there, right there, right there. You can put it in the papers with the different road repairs and hammer on how you've actually accomplished what they asked for. I do wish that we could do more with and we can do other lines for the libraries, parks, and youth programs. But I think this is a great example to actually help turn that perspective around. It's visible, and however you decide to do it, I just think it's a great tool that you could actually use to help the community start believing in investing anymore. And I'm not saying that anything negative about you, I'm just saying what's been brought up, that this is an opportunity that is a great visual confirmation of what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else from the public? There being none, I'll bring it back to the councils and the board for further discussion, and I'll start with Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me, this has gotten kind of convoluted. I think this started last year with the concern about Highway 25 and Highway 25 not being on the regional transportation plan or the metropolitan transportation of AMBAG. One of the things that I realized through this process was to put Highway 25 on the constraint list, which is a term for Caltrans, and that would allow it to qualify for state dollars. We needed to become a self-help community. We need to pass a sales tax measure that would at least partially support the improvements to Highway 25. Going into a history lesson, the Measure A, that was actually started by the Hollister Downtown Association with the intent of moving Highway 156 off of Main Street, San Benito Street, and 4th Street. That was its main intent. The Hollister Downtown Association realized that they were going to need community support. The Measure A committee was formed, and the Measure A committee very quickly saw that a sales tax measure just to move 156 off of Main Street and off the center of town was not going to pass countywide. So they developed a list of projects, one of which was the improvement to the intersection of 156 and Almaden in San Juan, and gave San Juan their stoplight there. It had other road improvements, but it developed projects for the whole county, for the benefit of the whole county. I'm in favor of a COG-specific measure that needs to be vetted out to come up with projects countywide that would be beneficial to the whole county. I understand San Juan, and the city of San Juan has more issues with the intersection of 156 and the Alameda. They also have issues with the intersection of Monterey Road and 156. Those are the type of things that could be part of a project list and benefit the citizens of San Juan and the citizens of the west part of the county. The roads in South County have a lot of issues. That can be set aside. The city of Hollister, money could be set aside for the city of Hollister. We can craft this tax any way we want, have any projects we want on it, have any division of the money that we want. What I've heard tonight was, I did not hear a consensus for option one. I did not hear a consensus of the option one requiring the city of Hollister to rescind its present sales tax. I don't blame them. I think we need to go probably on our own and for whatever we want to do. But for me, Highway 25 and our roads and going with a COG-led sales tax initiative is the most important thing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, I was hearing the same thing, that there was some, hesitation on a number of the council members from Hollister on repealing their tax. But I agree with the mayor that, we do live in a small county and with, just the two cities, and we should be working together. We're pretty much all on the same team as far as the way I look at it, but we do have our own unique issues and problems, and the city of Hollister has done their measures for their additional 1% for very good reason during a very, very tough time, and that's be in need of renewing for quality of life purposes and some of the things services that city residents do expect. But I'm not seeing where, there's a willingness to waive the rest of their measure and go forward with this. And so I'm kind of leaning towards option 3, but with the emphasis and the importance of doing this countywide transportation tax. I don't know if at some point we got to have a discussion. Are we going to do the 0.5% that we did the polling on? I don't think that's enough money. And 1% may be too much because that will put the city of San Juan at 9.25% and the city of Hollister at 9.5%. And I'm concerned about that. But in any case, a special tax is, what I strongly support, and let the voters decide. I think we define a project list or a split of revenue for the two cities and the county with that special tax, so the voters can decide how we repair and maintain our roads. Option 3, with the county unincorporated tax only, just for the sake of bringing maybe us up to the level of the two cities for sales tax, only has merit if it's used for public safety. And I know we've had a lot of discussions about the library and the parks, and I've wrestled with that. I think those are good arguments, but the sheriff was up here just a few minutes ago, and he, is concerned about his staffing levels in the field, and they have been at critical low levels. We just did a budget hearing, mock hearing yesterday, and it's not solving this problem anytime soon. And so I would suggest to my colleagues on the board, moving forward, is that we support a 1% special tax countywide for COG, through COG, and maybe a 0.25% general tax just to deal with public safety and shore up our public safety needs and make the streets a little bit more safer. I don't want to support a general tax just because the county's a little bit lower than the cities. I can't rationalize that. Most of the sales tax out in the county is probably paid by businesses. The people that live out in the county, they come into the stores, whether it's in San Juan Bautista or Hollister, and purchase their goods and pay the 8.5%. And it's really the businesses, the jobs, and they're paying unsecured taxes for equipment that's bought anyhow. So, the city is not, at that much of a disadvantage to the residents, I'm saying, as maybe some would think. So I am only willing to tax for specific purposes and for specific needs. And that's my position, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Reed.
Madam Chair, I don't want to belabor the point, but, as far as the transportation checks, I think we could all agree to it. I think it's necessary. As far as the rate, that's why we have representatives on COG. They could hash it out and, and hammer out those details. But as far as, the direction I'd like to see our board take, and I think we've heard a lot about transportation, but I think it goes back to your point on improving our quality of life. And I think that, we do need to go for an unincorporated tax for the full 1%, because it's our opportunity to take our case to the voters and tell them how we're going to improve their quality of life and how we can responsibly use that money. And then let's put it on their laps, whether they want that increase or not. So that's where I am, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Supervisor Delacour.
Hey, I'll make it real short and simple. I will continue to support a cooperation and partnership with the City of Hollister and San Juan Bautista on the purpose of, and I'll steal some of your words, Madam Chair, a quality of life type of measure for our roads, for our parks, and definitely our library. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We all know, and I think we all believe, that the roads are probably the most important thing that we have to address at this time. Better roads do improve quality of life if we don't have good roads. So that's probably the greatest asset that a county has and a city. And without good roads, you don't attract business, you don't attract jobs, you don't attract people to come to and live here. So roads are critical. I'd rather do something than nothing. If we don't decide on anything tonight, here we are. We may have a really bad weather year in the next couple of years. Then what are we going to do? It's going to cost us twice as much to repair what we already know needs are in repair. So I will support a special tax with Supervisor Botello, with a specific plan, with input from the cities and with input from the county. And if I have to give up my vision of library and parks and concentrate just on roads, I'm willing to do that, to do something rather than nothing. So that's my take.
Thank you very much. I think we have to step back and understand, at least I want to make sure that I'm expressing myself clearly as far as the city's perspective. I don't think it's fair that the city of Hollister currently is at 8.5, higher than everyone else, and for different reasons. But to go up higher than that for a special tax really is not fair to the city, the residents in the city. We've done a lot in our city over the last few years to pay down debt aggressively so we could start moving towards repairing our roads, and we plan to do that in the next year. The idea of this sales tax was, how do we work together to help each other so we're all at the same level as far as the general tax, and that would have been at 8.5. The city of Hollister still needs those dollars. Idea was to help the county, because we know the county needs those dollars also to do road improvements and hire more sheriff, do the things they need to do. And I'm sure the San Juan Bautista could use a few dollars. And again, we're now, as one community, we're in the same dollar range. And we're talking about one tax. What I'm hearing right now is about 3 different taxes that are going to be on the ballot. And I'm pretty sure what's going to happen with that is they're going to start to fail. And when they do, we at the city, we are going to have a hard time, because at that point, we will not have any money to fix any roads. We will not have money to do what we're doing right now. And we're going to start suffering together. And when that happens, I'm pretty sure that the citizens are not going to approve the next tax if we start talking about the road, the 0.5%. We can all go out and try to do our own little thing, but we're going to find ourselves in trouble. Again, we need to be honest with the community of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it together. These dollars would stay within the different government agencies. It's up to us to spend them wisely, put them to work, bond to get our roads done, and the other projects we need to get done as a community. The idea of they're rescinding our tax would only happen once the citizens approved the community group overall, because we don't want to be paying 9.5%. We want to be at 8.5%. It's been working for us as a city. We made a lot of progress. So I'm trying to point out to all of you that if we're not careful, we're going to start seeing all of these things go down. Then we're not going to have the money to fix our roads, and within 5 years, we'll never have enough money to fix our roads. So if there was ever a time to work together and be fair amongst the whole community, now's the time. It achieves the same goal, and I think if you ask most people in our community, they do feel that they are part of one community. So I caution everybody to think about that before we start going off on our own little tax measures. Thank you.
Councilwoman Solorio Luna.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As I said before, I would take a very strong stand against eliminating any tax for the city of Hollister. I really believe that we put trust in our citizens, in our residents. There is a great need to continue that measure. And I think the city of Hollister and the residents, we need to begin to work with them again so that we can continue to have their trust in approving the measure again, because the funds are needed. I don't want to leave out the library. I think we all have to think about the library. Look at all the residents that use that library. I don't know if you've been in there or even on a weekend like I have. And I see people from San Juan. I see people from other places coming into the library. To me, that is so important. But again, I mean, I just want to restate my statement and my belief that I will not agree to anything, any plan removing and eliminating the tax from the city of Hollister.
Councilman Miller, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I might come across a little crass on this, but to me, it doesn't really matter what the tax rate is for the city of San Juan Bautista or the county of San Benito. It doesn't really matter to me at all. What matters is the level of service that we provide the citizens. The TOT died because no one explained what it was. And that's the simple fact. It was a really easy idea that wasn't explained to the people. It was, 4% increase that we weren't going to pay. On that same, on the same ballot, we had school bond measures that passed by 10%, and we were paying those. And I voted for the school bond, and I also voted for the TOT. And I think that if people would have, if it would have been explained to people what it was, that would have passed as well, and I hope it does next year. Moving forward, anything that we bring to the people, it has to be a narrative. You have to tell the story, you have to show what's going to happen, or otherwise we might as well not talk about it anymore, and we just spent 2 hours for no reason here. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little excited because it bothers me. I think that there needs to be a story told, and there needs to be accountability for the funds that we're asking for, and the only way that we can do this is if we continue to show improvements monthly, and that's what I think we're doing with the parks. I think that we've come a long way, and I don't want to see the funds go away because no one wants to be at the top of the curve on the economy and have to cut people, and that's what's going to happen if our sales tax goes away, that 1%. And that's going to be a lot harder to sell than 1%, continuing the 1% and actually making improvements in the city. I'm probably a little off topic here, but I think it all comes back together. The COG tax, I really hope it works out. I think that 67% of anything is tough, but the need is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gomez? Mayor Lund?
Yeah, I think, we were bringing up Measure E, and I think we're just more educational on it. What if they were to rescind it? What would be the plus side of that? Would they be able to go after another tax? Just kind of trying to figure out what to do. But, a lot of those questions were answered tonight, and I think we all have a lot more, education about that. And, I don't want to see them take that back. And, I strongly feel for them on that. Looking at some of these other counties around here, they're at 9.5%, 10%. And, the county's at 7.5%. I think, if we advocate this in the right way and we direct these funds to special projects, I don't see it being a problem passing. And I think if you get that information out to them now and they're driving down the road and they hit that pothole, they're going to say, that's probably a pretty good idea. And so, I'm strongly in favor of, going to those with COG with a plan, a specific plan, and that's something that'll be tabletopped for a while, and we'll get it down. Maybe we can get a lot of information from the public of what they want too, because they're the ones that are going to be voting on it. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Edge?
I think the only thing that's going to,
If you could come up closer to the mic, please.
With the kids' table here, it's hard.
Yeah. I think the only thing that we can get the public behind us to support is a specific tax. I don't think that we're going to be able to lump a library and parks and all that sort of thing into it as much as we want to. I think we have to decide what our biggest need is and go for that, because taxes are not popular. Beyond that, I can't really make any decisions tonight, because I think this is a very big subject, and I think we all need to study it a lot more before we make any commitments.
Councilman West?
I agree that the COG tax with the specifics, I mean, we all got to sell this thing. And if I go, as Tony says, as Councilman Bach said, and say, I'm going to fix 5th Street, or I'm going to fix 3rd Street, or I'm going to do this. This is what we're going to do. I can get votes for that. If I say, give it to us, trust us, we'll handle it, I ain't going to get any votes for that.
Thank you. Councilman Bach?
Because we're at the kids' table, do we get Jell-O?
You'll get enough.
Seriously, and you may think I'm cynical, but I'm pretty sure the 0.5% COG tax would pass. A general tax increase, I don't think is going to happen. It appears to me the way we should do it, or possibly, is Hollister leaves their 1%. Possibly the county could go for a 1% increase in their sales tax. The unincorporated, from 7.5 to 8.5, and San Juan leaves their sales tax alone. Then everybody's kind of on an equal footing there. My problem with the general sales tax increase or anything like that is I can name numerous examples of where trust us. You're in good hands here, and then whatever you voted on doesn't get done. And I think of a couple of real good examples in San Juan. But so I don't think a general sales tax, unless you get real specific and say, okay, and maybe this would help if the county went up 1%. Could they put more money in the sheriff's budget? The city of San Juan pays some money towards the sheriff's budget. And again, I know I'm being cynical, but I think the 0.5% would pass. The county 1% probably would pass. And hey, Hollister, the one thing, this would really burn you. You have a vote to rescind your 1%, your Measure E, and then everything fails, you're burned.
Again, we would never even think about it unless one of these passed already. We need that
I
money.
know.
We're not going to get rid
You
of
put
it.
it all on the same ballot,
Yeah.
forget it.
Councilman Mortarami?
I think that the half, possibly a 3/4% COG with a very specific project list makes sense. I sympathize with Mayor Velasquez, and I think he makes a very good point. But the challenge I think we have is that there's not that many, there's not enough dollars in any of these to get the citizens in San Juan Bautista that excited about it. But the transportation tax, I think the COG portion makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that would fly. So that's really all I have to add.
Thank you. I think what we'll do at this time for the Board of Supervisors is to go ahead and I will entertain a motion to move forward, not necessarily on the options that are before you as stated, because these are just examples, but you've heard the support that we may get moving forward, and make a motion and see if we can move forward with either the 1% for the county, the 1%, well, the options that are presented, I'm sorry. either one of the options or to, independent of this, to support COG in their effort to be specific with road maintenance or road repairs, whatever we want to call them, and a specific amount in the language for the city of San Juan, the city of Hollister, and the county of San Benito, and with detail on how we're going to spend the money. And I believe we've been told that a COG tax could be as long as 20 to 30 years, and that certainly would give us the opportunity to do a lot with those monies throughout the years. So I'm just putting it out there for the board.
Madam Chair, can we just refer back to COG? Let them hash it out, see what, if they're going to bring a percentage term and how it's a spending bill?
I think you can do that. The only thing is that I think COG will probably want to hear the position of the board as a whole.
Madam Chair, I would like to have, the personally as one of the representatives on COG, the board's blessing to go forward with a proposal if the rest of the COG board's supports, but we have to have the affirmation that we go forward with such a proposal.
As a
Because
as a board.
As a board of supervisors.
yeah.
And one of the things I want to clarify before we go to that area, Madam Chair, if I could ask the mayor or the council members, because they stated, sounds like they want to stay at 8.5%. And if we do go forward with a COG measure, and if it's successful, assuming that, the general tax is renewed, potentially it could be whatever that percentage is higher. So is that something you want to do?
Yep.
Okay.
We could definitely have the discussions at our council meeting and go back to COG and have that discussion. I think our priority first is making sure that we do not lose what we have, because we do need to take care of more infrastructure and more issues within the city first. So that's our priority. And then COG would be a secondary.
Yeah, and I imagine that Councilmember Luna is going to help us increase the funding for the library from the city's budget a little bit, but I'm only making a joke.
I know you are. I know you are.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Munzer?
May I ask our councils if we can make individual motions as individual agencies?
Yes, we can. We are
Yeah.
having official meetings.
It's been, each body has agendized this meeting, and in each agenda, it allowed for the bodies to make a decision if that's what the bodies want. You don't have to, but you have the latitude to do it if that's what you want.
Okay, then I would like to take.
I believe. So go ahead, and then, yes.
Okay, because if I still have the floor, I would like to see from each of the agencies, this is what I asked from my COG representatives. I wanted to see from each of the agencies a vote on whether they supported a COG, the concept of COG going forward with a sales tax for transportation.
Madam Chair, from the Board of Supervisors, I'll make the motion that we move forward with a transportation tax and kick it back to our COG, or to our COG representatives, so they could, move forward with it.
I'll second the motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to go back to COG and let them, that we will support their position of a special tax for transportation. Any further discussion?
What other, so that would give us representatives the leeway of whatever percentage that we could arrive at COG, whether it's 0.5%, 0.75%, 1%.
You guys hammer it out.
You guys hammer it.
Oh, wow. Feel the power.
I would rather be a little more specific and say that the study that was done for 0.5%. I would like to, I will support it if we go with 0.5%, because that is what COG is really looking for.
Right.
And have 30 years, go 30
Right.
years.
And-
And if it works out, that it could pan out, then that's what I will support.
Yeah, and I would hope that our representatives would take the professional advice from staff and not get some crazy number.
That's in the motion, too.
That was in the motion.
That is in the motion.
Part of the motion, a hope and a prayer.
So a crazy idea from staff is okay, as long as it doesn't come from us.
You said it was from our professional staff.
So it sounds like you would, my idea of trying to encourage COG to go with a survey, because that has been proven, what the voters will support. It is at 70-something%. It appears that it wouldn't be as risky, and they would, a multitude of benefit would be there in regards to roads. So then, in that case, I will support that as well.
Call
So-
for the question, Madam Chair.
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Madam Chair, could you repeat that motion?
I will have, let's see, maybe council can repeat that motion for us, please?
Yeah, but I believe basically it was to authorize the two COG members to go back to COG and advocate for a 0.5% tax to be governed by COG for 20 to 30 years. And,
Okay, 30.
excuse me, 30 years. Okay?
I'd move that for San Juan Bautista, same motion.
30 years.
Can you get your mics in front of you, please?
Okay.
Yeah, they got
We always go after Hollister.
Yeah, where the little kids see.
Did San Juan make a motion?
Yes, we did.
We'd like to.
We're going to wait, finish after Hollister,
Oh, okay.
because it's more discussion time.
What do you do?
Yeah.
In front of Hollister.
City
As
attorney.
far as City of Hollister, with the council members here, I think it's better that we wait, have a discussion at our council meeting. We need to first understand, again, our 1% that we need to keep our city going, and how those monies could be used for some of the road improvements. Then we could look at the other 0.5% in a conversation first at the city council. We'll put it on our agenda to talk about it, whether to go ahead and move that forward on the COG committee. So we decided to wait for a meeting amongst us at the city council.
Okay. City of San Juan?
We made a motion to, or I make a motion to do the same thing the Board of Supervisors did.
I second
Excuse
it.
me.
Discussion.
Okay, so we taking the same motion as
The board.
county
As the
supervisors,
Board of Supervisors.
and that was made by Tony Bach and seconded by Jim West.
Discussion.
Any discussion?
It was made by Tony Bach.
Okay. Rick, I know you were, are you comfortable?
Yeah, would you put the microphone?
Sorry. Tony made a motion
West.
mirroring the county's, the Board of Supervisors motion, seconded by Jim. We just asked if there was any discussion internally. I asked specifically Rick, because Rick has not had as much exposure to this material. If he had any questions, he said no, and I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, so all discussions done, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0 for San Juan Bautista.
And because we're still in session, Supervisor Rivas, you wanted to make
Right.
another?
I do want to make another motion, and that is for our Board of Supervisors. I still don't want the issue to die for an unincorporated tax, and so I'm going to make a motion that our board, that we pursue an unincorporated tax.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Yes, is that just to continue discussion, or are you setting a,
Well, clearly, I don't want to hold hostage the council members, because we'll probably be here for another hour talking about.
So
what we're gonna-
you'll bring it back to another agenda?
Yes, I'd like to bring it back to our next agenda, so we could hammer out some details.
Okay,
If
so-
this motion, obviously, if it is approved.
Okay, and the motion, again, to clarify, is to bring back the idea of having the 1% for only the unincorporated part of the
I wouldn't,
the
I
county.
wouldn't say 1%. because
Yeah, I didn't say percent, I
You
just
didn't say
said,
percentage?
no,
Oh.
let's,
We did not
so we
say
can hammer out the
percentage.
details at our next meeting.
Okay.
But I just want to get the concept out there that we will pursue an unincorporated tax.
Oh, okay, then we will pursue it. I think it was mine
first.
So there's any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Call for adjournment.
Okay. Are your sessions over?
Yeah.
Okay, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Say
Our
goodbye.
meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.